It was an early, crisp morning in Washington, D.C. The city was still yawning awake, its familiar hum only just stirring as the first hints of sunlight crept over the horizon. The Secret Service headquarters, a fortress of discipline and careful choreography, sat in a quiet part of the Capitol. Every inch of its polished exterior and meticulously maintained corridors spoke of routine, precision, and unyielding order. This building, a veritable citadel of national security, was rarely the setting for unscripted events. And yet, on this day, an event unfolded that would leave its agents and many of the nation's top officials questioning everything they thought they knew. Donald Trump, a figure as polarizing as he was famous, had always been in the public eye. His life, marked by triumphs, controversies, and unpredictability, had often blurred the line between showmanship and statecraft. But nothing in the annals of Secret Service history could have prepared its agents for what happened on that peculiar morning. No formal warning had come down the chain of command. No scheduled appointment, no secure communique to set expectations. Just a motorcade pulling up to the main entrance out of the blue at a time when the building was as predictable as clockwork. The main entrance itself was designed for a different kind of spectacle. A blend of fortified security measures, elegant design, and absolute professionalism. The guards at the door were trained to handle every conceivable scenario, yet nothing quite like this. In a swift, almost cinematic moment, the heavy glass doors swung open and out stepped Donald Trump, accompanied by a scant entourage of aides, barely more than a handful of staff members, and curiously, with no throng of cameras, no reporters clamoring for a glimpse. Trump's arrival seemed both deliberate and enigmatically understated. Inside the entrance hall, agents exchanged glances laden with confusion and curiosity. Conversations broke out in low, urgent whispers. "What in the world is he doing here?" one agent muttered, his eyes scanning the figure who now strode through the corridors. Another, a veteran of decades of protective detail, simply shook his head in disbelief. It was as if a carefully rehearsed routine had suddenly veered off its script. Trump's demeanor was as unmistakable as ever, confident, resolute, and with an air of someone who had long been in control. He passed through the metal detectors without hesitation, his gait steady and purposeful. There was no grand gesture of acknowledgement, no smile directed at the security team. He simply walked, as if following a well-known path, even though it was clearly uncharted territory for him. The agents, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and concern, watched as he advanced deeper into the building. The quiet murmur of speculation was interrupted by the sound of his footsteps echoing off the sterile marble floors. Trump's route was far from typical. Instead of heading towards a designated meeting room or the operations center where he might be briefed on pressing matters, he veered off into a hallway that was normally off-limits to visitors. This corridor, usually reserved for essential communications and classified meetings, now became the stage for a drama no one had expected. An agent stationed in the hallway, a younger man with bright eyes and a nervous energy, leaned over to his supervisor and whispered, "Where's he going? That's not a public route." The supervisor, a seasoned operative with decades of service behind him, didn't reply immediately. Instead, he reached for his earpiece and attempted to contact command. But all he got was a static-laced silence, a deafening reminder that something was amiss. Trump's stride never faltered. He moved with a quiet intensity, as if driven by an inner mission that transcended the ordinary. He passed by the operations center and the intelligence briefing room, areas that would have made sense for a high-ranking official to inspect, without stopping. His eyes darted around with an alertness that was both deliberate and disconcerting. Each step deepened the mystery. What was his intent? Was this an impromptu inspection, a personal security check, or something far more calculated? Then came the moment that shifted the entire dynamic of the day. Approaching a left turn, Trump directed his steps towards a hallway known to be among the most secure within the building. This corridor led directly to the tactical training facility, a place where the nation's elite Secret Service agents honed their skills in combat, situational response, and live fire exercises. This area was off-limits to even the highest echelons of visitors, reserved for intensive classified drills that maintained the force's readiness against any conceivable threat. A palpable tension gripped the air. The lead agent in that section, a formidable man in his 50s whose career was built on an unwavering commitment to protocol, stepped forward. His voice, low and measured, broke the stillness of the hallway. "Mr. President, that area is off-limits." His tone was not aggressive, but carried the weight of authority and concern. Yet Trump, with an inscrutable expression, did not slow his pace. Instead, he approached a heavily reinforced steel door as if it were merely another entrance to a routine office, and without a word, pushed it open. As the door swung wide, a hush fell over the room beyond. Inside the tactical training facility, the atmosphere was charged with a blend of adrenaline and apprehension. This space was a world apart from the formal corridors of the headquarters. Here, the air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and sweat. Large screens broadcasted live feeds from multiple security cameras, capturing every moment with a relentless, unblinking gaze. High-ranking instructors, some of whom had dedicated their lives to molding agents capable of rapid, precise action under duress, froze in their tracks. Their faces, etched with years of service, bore expressions that ranged from disbelief to concern. A burly instructor in his 60s, whose lined face and steely eyes betrayed a lifetime of discipline, was the first to register the shock. He exchanged a brief but intense look with a colleague, silently questioning the absurdity of the situation. "What the hell is he doing here?" he seemed to ask, his voice lost amid the mounting tension. But Trump had not yet spoken. He continued to walk purposefully into the facility, his eyes scanning the room as though he was rediscovering a place from a past he seldom spoke about. He passed a row of lifelike tactical mannequins, silent witnesses to countless training sessions, and eventually stopped at a training mat in the center of the room. It was at that moment that he spoke for the first time. "Let's see what you got." His voice, firm yet laced with a challenge, echoed around the room. The silence that followed was nearly tangible. A trainer, whose face reflected a mix of caution and disbelief, ventured to ask, "Are you serious, sir? This is a live drill facility. This isn't a demonstration room?" His tone was respectful, yet his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. Trump's response was cool and confident. "I know exactly what it is," he said, his eyes twinkling with an ambiguous promise of something unexpected. Then, in a gesture that startled everyone, he removed his jacket with deliberate calm. His tie loosened further, and within seconds he stepped onto the training mat, no fanfare, no pretension, just a quiet invitation for a challenge that no one had ever envisioned from a former president. All eyes in the facility were fixed on him. The room, once filled with the routine hum of training drills and the constant vigilance of security monitors, now fell into an uneasy, heavy silence. The lead instructor, a grizzled man with a buzz cut and a distinctive scar above his left eye, stepped forward. His stance was both professional and wary as he addressed Trump in a controlled tone. "Mr. President, this isn't a game." Yet despite the seriousness of the challenge, there was an undercurrent of intrigue in his eyes. After all, how often did one get a former president daring him to demonstrate his skills? Trump's response was a faint, enigmatic smirk. "Neither is the job you do," he replied. It was an answer that carried with it layers of meaning. a subtle acknowledgement of the risks inherent in the role of protecting national leaders, and perhaps a hint at a deeper understanding of power and combat that few had ever suspected he possessed. Without waiting for further conversation, Trump pointed directly at the instructor. "Come on, show me what you teach these guys." The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down for all to see. In that moment, the dynamic in the room shifted from mere surprise to active, palpable tension. The instructors and agents, previously uncertain of how to react, now found themselves in a standoff between protocol and the unpredictable whims of a man who had never quite played by the conventional rules. A younger agent, barely in his 30s and with a look of incredulous amusement, whispered to a colleague, "This can't be real." But the tension was undeniable. The instructor's eyes narrowed as he considered the challenge. He was a man who had trained hundreds of agents, refining their techniques to near perfection, yet here he was, confronted by a figure who defied every expectation, a former president whose presence in a classified facility was both an honor and an inexplicable breach of normalcy. "All right, sir," the instructor finally said, his voice steady yet laced with a hint of wariness. "I'll go easy." Trump shook his head, as if dismissing any notion of leniency. "Don't," he replied, his tone firm and resolute. In that heartbeat, the entire room braced itself for what was to come. The instructor moved first, executing a swift, practiced maneuver designed to control and subdue an opponent. His movement was the product of years of training and countless hours spent perfecting his craft. Yet, what happened next caught everyone completely off guard. Trump's counter was not a display of raw professional combat training. He wasn't a martial arts expert or a seasoned fighter in the traditional sense. But his response was instinctual, defensive yet undeniably effective. He parried the move with a speed and fluidity that belied his public persona. There was a moment, a split second in which the instructor's momentum faltered. A second move, a precise block, and a subtle shift in his weight forced him off balance. The change was so sudden that even the observers in the room exchanged incredulous glances. "Did he just— No way!" someone whispered, the disbelief spreading like wildfire among the assembled agents and instructors. Realizing that the challenge was escalating, the instructor stepped back, his eyes narrowing as he prepared for the next exchange. His training took over completely, and he no longer held anything back. He advanced once more, his movements now calculated and forceful, embodying the very essence of professional combat readiness. Trump, in response, moved with a deliberate caution that was as calculated as it was instinctive. It was clear that he was no amateur. Every gesture, every defensive parry, carried a sense of someone who had learned to survive, to adapt in situations that were far from ordinary. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch out in time, Trump executed a maneuver that left the room in stunned silence. With a measured, controlled movement, he dropped the instructor not with the brute force one might expect, but with a fluid, almost elegant shift in balance that sent the seasoned trainer gently to the mat. The impact was more symbolic than destructive, a demonstration of proficiency that was both surprising and disarming. For several heartbeats, the room remained motionless, each person processing the scene before them. The instructor, still on the mat, lifted his eyes slowly to meet Trump's. There was no anger in his gaze, only confusion and a dawning respect for a challenge that transcended the usual boundaries of political theater. Finally, he sat up and exhaled, his voice a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "Where the hell did you learn that?" Trump's response was understated. He adjusted his cuffs, casually draped his jacket back over his shoulders, and offered a smirk that carried an air of mystery. "Let's just say, I've been around." The words were simple, yet they resonated deeply with the onlookers. In that brief moment, what might have been dismissed as bravado revealed itself to be a glimpse into a past and a set of skills that no one in the room had ever anticipated. The room's tension began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious admiration that mingled with an undercurrent of apprehension. Some agents exchanged sidelong glances, silently acknowledging that what they had just witnessed was far beyond the realm of a simple training exercise. There was a collective recognition that this was a moment that challenged every preconceived notion they had about power, security, and the unpredictable nature of high-profile figures. But the ripples of this event did not end within the walls of the tactical training facility. Far down the hall, in a secure surveillance room bristling with monitors and humming with the constant flow of intelligence data, high-ranking officials were watching the unfolding drama with rapt attention. Among them was a senior director, a man with decades of experience in government operations whose reputation for sharp analysis was legendary. His eyes, trained to pick up even the slightest anomaly, had been glued to the screens since the incident began. The director's fingers drummed against the desk as he rewatched the footage, each replay deepening his intrigue. "We need to talk to him," he finally said, his tone measured but carrying an unmistakable urgency. He didn't know at that moment who else had already taken notice of this unusual occurrence, but it was clear that the implications ran far deeper than a simple impromptu display of combat prowess. As Trump exited the tactical training facility, he carried with him the nonchalant aura of someone who had just completed a routine visit. Yet behind him, the agents and officials were left reeling. His tie remained loose, and his expression, while calm, held a certain inscrutability that provoked endless speculation. The incident was not a planned publicity stunt. There were no cameras deliberately set up to capture every moment, no carefully constructed narrative to explain his presence or his actions. And yet, the day's events had already set off a chain reaction that was about to shake the very foundations of the Secret Service. Back in the surveillance room, an analyst, a sharp-eyed woman with over a decade of experience in decoding behavioral patterns, was the first to break the silence that followed the replayed footage. "He didn't fight like a politician," she observed, her voice quiet but charged with a mixture of admiration and alarm. Her words, simple yet potent, caused the senior director's gaze to shift towards her with renewed focus. "Explain," he prompted. The analyst proceeded to replay the footage, slowing it down frame by frame. Her commentary was precise. "Notice his movement. Not overly polished like a professional fighter, yet distinctly effective. His counters aren't the result of a gym-trained regimen. They're adaptive, almost as if he's reacting to something ingrained from a life lived under pressure." Another analyst, an ex-military officer known for his methodical approach, chimed in. "Those were counter-surveillance takedowns, moves you'd expect from someone who had to learn to protect himself in environments where danger was the norm." A long silence filled the room as the senior director absorbed the implications. Then, with a measured calm that belied the gravity of his thoughts, he said, "Get me his old security records." His voice was firm, leaving no room for debate. The request was met with hesitation from one of the analysts. "Sir, those files are classified." The director cut him off immediately. "I don't care. Get them. Because if Trump had a past that no one knew about, it means someone else did, and if that someone was watching, this moment has just changed everything." Within the confines of the Secret Service headquarters, whispers began circulating like wildfire. Agents who had witnessed the unprecedented scene replayed the events in hushed tones in every hallway and briefing room. They debated over the implications of a former president who not only dared to defy protocol, but seemed to possess a hidden skill set that made him unpredictable in ways that transcended the usual political theatrics. Behind closed doors, in a secure intelligence office lined with cabinets of classified documents, the senior director pored over a stack of security records that were as enigmatic as they were sensitive. The files, gathered from different eras of Trump's life, held fragments of a past that had long been buried under layers of redaction. One document in particular caught his attention. A file from the 1980s, a period before his presidency and before he had ever been in the full glare of the public spotlight. The file was riddled with redactions, entire paragraphs blacked out in a manner that suggested information of the utmost importance was being deliberately concealed. The director's eyes fell on one unredacted line: location, Moscow, 1987. The name of the Russian capital, tied to a time when global politics were fraught with espionage and covert maneuvers, sent a chill down his spine. Why would a real estate mogul have classified surveillance logs from Moscow? He murmured, echoing the unspoken questions that reverberated through the room. The analyst cleared her throat and offered a measured comment. It might be that what we think we know about him is only a fraction of his past. Perhaps there's more to his story, more than anyone has ever suspected. Outside, in the corridors of the headquarters, agents continued with their duties, yet there was an unmistakable shift in the atmosphere. Where once Donald Trump had been viewed merely as a high-profile figure, an individual to be protected as part of a standard protocol, now he was cast in a different light. His actions had revealed layers that went beyond politics or business. They hinted at a past steeped in experiences that were perhaps as secret as they were significant. And as the days passed, discreet discussions and nervous glances became common in briefing rooms. Files were quietly re-examined and security clearances were updated with a sense of urgency that was palpable to all who were part of the service. In the weeks that followed, the incident at the tactical training facility became something of an urban legend within the agency. Agents recounted the moment in hushed tones during training sessions and late-night briefings. They spoke of the way Trump had moved, his calculated parries and instinctive counters, and they couldn't help but wonder what kind of training or experience could have instilled such reflexes. Some speculated that perhaps there was a history of clandestine operations, a past that had never been fully disclosed to the public or even to many within the agency. Others simply noted that his actions, while impressive, were impossible to reconcile with the image of a man who had always been more about deal-making and public statements than physical combat. The higher-ups in the intelligence community, meanwhile, were taking a closer look. The senior director's order to retrieve Trump's old security records had set off a flurry of activity among the intelligence analysts. In a secure room lined with multiple monitors and files of every conceivable classification level, analysts worked feverishly, piecing together fragments of a past that had been obscured by time and secrecy. They found hints of operations and assignments that were never made public, missions that, if fully disclosed, would likely change the public's understanding of the man who had once been a real estate mogul, a television personality, and a president. One analyst, a quiet and methodical woman with a penchant for detail, remarked during one late-night session, "It's as if every redaction is a reminder that there are chapters of his life deliberately left out of the history we've been told." Her colleague, an ex-military operative known for his stoic demeanor, nodded silently, his eyes fixed on a particularly cryptic memo referencing a mission in Moscow. The analyst's words echoed in the director's mind as he reread the unredacted line. Location, Moscow, 1987. That single piece of information became the keystone of a mystery that was rapidly growing in significance. Back at the headquarters, a renewed sense of vigilance permeated the air. The incident had underscored one undeniable truth. Power is not just about wealth, status, or the ability to command public attention. It is also about the unseen, the unknown, the skills and experiences that are hidden from plain sight, even within the most secure institutions. And on that day, Trump had reminded everyone of that simple, unsettling fact. Meanwhile, as the public remained blissfully unaware of the events that had taken place within those sterile corridors and training facilities, the corridors themselves began to whisper with a new, tentative energy. Agents who had once seen the world in black and white were now forced to grapple with shades of gray. What did it mean for their security protocols? Who was really in charge? And what did it mean when someone as unexpected as a former president could challenge the very principles they had dedicated their lives to upholding? For some, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that in a world where nothing is ever truly predictable, the unexpected could come from the most unlikely of sources. For others, it was a moment of profound introspection, a catalyst that would drive them to question the narratives they had long accepted as truth. And for a select few high-ranking officials, it was a clue that, if followed, might unravel a web of secrets and lies that extended far beyond the boundaries of the Secret Service. In the days and weeks that followed, the investigation into Trump's visit took on a life of its own. Quiet meetings were held in secure rooms far removed from the public eye. Senior officials pored over classified files, debating the implications of what they had seen and what it might mean for national security. Conversations that began with polite skepticism slowly evolved into discussions laced with urgency and concern. "If he has this kind of training or experience," one official whispered during a closed-door meeting, "what else have we been missing about his past?" Another, more pragmatic voice responded, "We protect him because he's a public figure. But if his past is more complex than we thought, then maybe it's time we look at our protocols in a new light." Throughout these internal debates, one question remained at the center of every discussion. What did Trump really know, and who else might be privy to that knowledge? The answer, as elusive as it was, hinted at a reality where secrets were the most valuable currency of all. It was a reminder that power, in its purest form, is not always measured in dollars or votes, but in the hidden chapters of one's history, the moments that define us, but are never meant to be fully understood. And so, as the Secret Service headquarters settled back into its routine, the events of that morning continued to resonate. Every agent, every analyst, and every high-ranking official who had witnessed or learned of the incident now carried with them an unspoken question. What other mysteries lay hidden beneath the polished surface of public figures? And more importantly, who among them held the keys to unlocking those mysteries? For Donald Trump, the day had been one of quiet defiance, a demonstration that he was not content to be confined by the expectations of his public persona. He had walked into the heart of the nation's security apparatus and, with a single challenge, had upended the established order. His departure from the Secret Service headquarters was as unceremonious as his arrival. There were no grand farewells, no carefully crafted statements to explain his actions. He simply walked out, leaving behind a trail of questions that would continue to haunt the corridors of power for weeks to come. In the weeks following the event, rumors began to circulate among those who had witnessed the episode. Some speculated that Trump's actions were part of a larger plan, an elaborate maneuver to remind his protectors that he was not just a figurehead, but someone who had lived through and perhaps even mastered situations that most could only imagine. Others whispered of connections to secret operations in his youth, of covert assignments that had never seen the light of day. And while no one had concrete evidence to substantiate these claims, the seed of doubt had been planted. The legacy of that day was not simply the spectacle of a former president engaging in a physical challenge. It was the emergence of a new narrative, one that blurred the lines between public persona and hidden truths. As the investigation into his security records deepened, new details began to emerge. The files painted a picture of a man whose life had been marked by both brilliance and controversy. They hinted at clandestine meetings in dimly lit rooms, coded communications that referenced operations in far-flung corners of the globe, and interactions with figures whose names were known only to a select few. The record suggested that the training, the skills, the very instincts that had been displayed on that fateful morning were not the result of a casual interest in physical combat. They were the residue of a past that had been carefully hidden away. A past that was as much a part of his identity as his public persona. For the senior director, these revelations were both exhilarating and deeply troubling. The notion that a man he had long believed to be defined solely by his business acumen and political bravado might also be a veteran of covert operations, trained in the art of survival and defense, upended decades of assumptions. The implications were vast. It meant that there were layers to Trump's identity that could, if fully understood, alter the way national security protocols were designed and implemented. It raised unsettling questions about what the public knew and what the intelligence community had chosen to keep hidden. In one particularly intense briefing, a group of top agents and analysts gathered in a secure conference room deep within the headquarters. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with anticipation as the senior director laid out the evidence before them. "We are dealing with someone whose past is not as straightforward as we once believed," he said, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. "There are gaps in the records. There are redactions that speak of operations and experiences far beyond the realm of typical business or political activity. We must consider the possibility that his skills are the result of something far more deliberate, a background steeped in experience that we have not been privy to." The room fell silent as each agent grappled with the implications. The idea that their most high-profile charge might have been involved in clandestine operations in Moscow or elsewhere challenged everything they had been trained to assume. It was a turning point, a moment when the safe, predictable world of protocol collided head-on with the unpredictable, murky depths of hidden truths. And yet, amid all the speculation and internal debate, one thing remained clear. The events of that morning had irrevocably changed the atmosphere at the Secret Service headquarters. No longer was Trump seen solely as a political figure or a business mogul. Instead, he had become a symbol of the unknown, a living reminder that beneath the carefully managed public image lay secrets, skills, and experiences that defied conventional categorization. As months passed, the narrative of that fateful day continued to evolve. The incident became the subject of internal memos, discreet discussions over classified files, and even hushed conversations in the break rooms of the headquarters. It was a story that would not soon be forgotten. A story that encapsulated the unpredictable intersection of power, mystery, and the ever-present possibility that what we think we know about a person may only be the tip of the iceberg. For those on the front lines of security, the challenge was clear. They now had to contend with the possibility that every individual, no matter how familiar their public persona, might harbor secrets that could upend the expected order of things. And as they redoubled their efforts to ensure that no detail was overlooked, the memory of that day remained a potent reminder. Sometimes, the most unpredictable threat comes not from outside forces, but from the hidden depths of a person's past. Donald Trump's unexpected visit, with its blend of bravado, mystery, and undeniable skill, had left an indelible mark on the halls of the Secret Service. It had forced everyone to confront a truth that was as simple as it was unsettling. Power, in all its forms, was not just about the public image we project, but about the secrets we carry with us. Secrets that, if ever revealed, could change the game entirely. In the end, as agents continued to analyze the footage and pore over the classified records, one question lingered. Did Trump's demonstration represent a calculated display meant to remind his protectors and the nation of his hidden depths? Or was it simply a spontaneous act, a moment of clarity in the midst of a carefully controlled life? Perhaps the truth was somewhere in between, a fusion of deliberate planning and instinctive action that defied easy explanation. For the senior director and his team, the quest for answers was far from over. The mysterious file marked Moscow 1987 became a focal point for further investigation, a symbol of the tangled web of secrets that defined not only Trump's past, but the very nature of power itself. As intelligence officers delved deeper into the archives, they found themselves confronting not just the legacy of one man, but the enduring mystery of what it means to hold power in a world where nothing is ever as it seems. And so, the story of that day lives on, not just as an isolated incident, but as a transformative moment in the ongoing narrative of national security. It is a story that challenges assumptions, blurs the lines between public and private, and reminds us that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are those that lie hidden beneath the surface. What happened in those corridors that morning continues to spark debates and fuel speculation among those who remember every moment with equal parts awe and trepidation. In the quiet of the night, when the flash of camera lenses and the clamor of political battles fade away, one thing remains clear. The world of power is never static, and neither are the people who inhabit it. Donald Trump's unannounced visit had upended expectations, redefined boundaries, and left behind a legacy of questions that will keep the intelligence community and the nation on high alert for years to come. In the end, the legacy of that morning was not just a display of physical prowess or a challenge to establish protocols. It was a reminder that in the realm of national security, where every detail is scrutinized and every move is calculated, there remains a place for the unexpected. And sometimes, the most significant revelations come not from careful planning, but from moments when the past and present collide in ways that leave everyone, agents and officials alike, speechless and forever changed.